Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for coming to the seminar. So as you just can read in the title, this is a paper on fiscal policy. And it's basically to see the effects of some policy reforms that have been discussed in the US in the past years on people that they are low income. So I'm going to focus on low income households, paying attention to behavioral responses. So the main contribution here, I've been discussing with some of you this morning, the main contribution here is to include behavioral responses in the evaluation of policy reforms. Okay, so we want to see how people respond in terms of savings, in terms of consumption, labor supply, and also marital decisions. So we are going to include all these margins, and just to see how different tax transfer systems are going to affect the decision of households, and therefore see how important it is to include behavioral responses in this type of models. So probably you don't need this introduction, but just briefly to place the audience into the data. In the US, poverty is a big problem. So almost 50 million people are poor, using the definition of poverty in the US, done by the Census Bureau. And they represent about 14.5% of the US population. And if you look at some groups of the population, like single mothers, like individuals with non-college education, poverty is much higher. So, for instance, if you look at female-headed households, most of them are single mothers, poverty is 30%. If you look at poverty among non-college educated, is 4 times the aggregate poverty rate. So the message from this slide is that poverty is a problem. There is an issue with poverty. And obviously the US government has implemented a variety of assistance programs which are designed to reduce poverty in the US. So the idea is just to look at these programs, the tax transfer system in the US, paying attention to a few of the programs, because there are many programs. Most of them are providing, there are in-kind programs. We are going to look at income programs, and we are going to see the effect on the individuals. So from this, you should retain that over the past 25, 30 years, there has been an increase in what is called means-tested programs, which they include earning requirements. So this is something that we are going to see in a few minutes, that transfers are given to people if they work and they have earnings. This has been the trend in the US in the past 30 years. The programs we are going to look at is obviously the income tax system, the taxes they pay. Then we are going to look at the tax credit, which is a tax credit that subsidizes low earnings. We are going to look at the child tax credit. We are going to look at the temporary assistance for needed families. It's called TANF. And the supplemental nutrition assistance program. The last one is not an income transfer. The last one is food stamps. They are vouchers for food. But it's almost like cash. So they can trade it. In some instances, even though it's illegal, sometimes they trade it for cash in the market. What is the question? So as I said, our research question here is just to identify and measure the incentives and the disincentives introduced by these programs to labor supply, savings, and family formation. So we are going to see how these programs, these transfers, affect the decisions of individuals along these 3 margins. Okay, these are the main margins that we should care of. Labor supply is the obvious one, just to see how people respond in terms of labor supply when they receive or they are entitled to receive transfers, what they do in terms of savings, and what they do in terms of family formation. Family formation is important because sometimes the benefits, they depend on the size of the family, so individuals may have an incentive not to form families. And we are going to use this model. It's going to be a macro model that we can simulate to evaluate the consequences of two reforms that they have been presented in the US in 2014. They were presented in Congress, they were discussed, but they were not approved. Okay, so this is an exercise of ex-ante policy evaluation. This is the classical exercise of ex-ante policy evaluation, and paying attention or using as examples these two proposals. The first one is the 21st Century Worker Tax Cut Act. It was presented by Senator Murray. She was a Democrat from Washington State. And the second is going to be the Tax Reform Act of 2014, introduced by Representative Dave Camp. He was a Republican from Michigan. Both of them, they were turned down. And probably versions of these two will come up again soon. So, just what is the roadmap for the rest of the talk? So just for you to see what is coming. I'm going to do a brief literature review, but it's going to be just a few minutes. Then I'm going to describe each of the programs I just introduced for you, just for you to see how they work. Then we go to the model, and there we will spend also a few minutes just to see what are the main building blocks of the model we use to evaluate these reforms. Briefly, calibration and model fit. I will spend just a few seconds. Then we will look at the effects of this tax transfer program in the US across the distribution, the equilibrium distribution of individuals, just to see how they affect different individuals depending on how they locate in the distribution of income. And then finally, we will evaluate the some reforms, including the two that I just presented. So, the literature, this is quite recent. So models, structural models of ex-ante policy reform, including behavioral responses, is relatively recent. The first three, they are models without a consumption-saving decision. So they only have labor supply. They look on the labor supply of some populations in the US, and they see how taxes and transfers, they change the labor supply decisions. Models with savings, as you can see, are more recent. The last one by Blandell, Diaz, Koster, McGeer, and Shaw. This is probably the main reference nowadays. This is a paper that came out in Econometrica this summer. It's a model that includes labor supply and consumption-saving decisions. And they use the model to evaluate a change in transfers in the UK. And the main focus here is on the education decisions of single mothers. So they focus on how transfer programs change the decision to go to school among single mothers in the UK. So our focus is a bit more on labor supply, consumption savings, and marital decisions. So the focus is different. The model is going to be slightly different as well. Let's go now one by one, describing the programs. This is one of the main programs to assist the poor in the US. It's called the Earned Income Tax Credit. It's a tax credit. It's administered by the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, and it's a refundable credit. So individuals, they can get money back. So it's not that reduces the tax liabilities. They also might get a check. This is the largest one, as I just said. It costs about 60 billion US dollars per year, and it's received by 27 million recipients. These are tax filers, 27 million tax filers. Conditions for eligibility and benefits, they depend on earnings. You have to have earnings to be eligible. Depends on capital income, the number of children, and the filing status. And it has this is how we can see it. It has a phase-in region. So this is the phase-in region of the program. So depending on the number of children, N stands for the number of children. And we have here the schedule for single households and for married couples. So a single mother will be the solid line, a married couple, it will be the extended dotted line. Okay? So it has 3 regions, a phasing region, this is a subsidy to earnings. So depending on the number of children and the filing status. So you get a subsidy that can go from 34% to almost 40%. Then it has a plateau where the credit is flat. And then it has a phase out. So as your earnings increase, the tax credit starts to phase out. So without using the model, what do we know about this program? We know that on the one hand, it has incentives to participate in the labor force. So if I'm out of the labor force, that is my earnings are 0, it has incentives for me to participate because I get a subsidy. So on top of my wage, I get a 35% subsidy. So it has incentives to participate. So in the phasing region, there are positive substitution effects. So increases my wage. So the substitution effect is positive. The income effect is negative. In the plateau, substitution effect is 0. The income effect is negative. In the phase out, both income and substitution effects are negative. So without a model, we already know that if I'm already working, I might reduce my hours if I in the flat region or in the phase out. So it has a disincentive to work. If I'm here, the effect is ambiguous because the income effect is negative. If I'm out, there is a positive effect to enter. So we should expect that the main effect of this program is to help people to enter in the market. But those that are already in the market, most likely they will reduce labor supply. This is without having a model. Now, let's go to the next program, which is the child tax credit. This is a very simple one. It's not an anti-poverty program because it gives like $1,000 per child, even if your income is as high as $100,000. So this is not exactly an anti-poverty program, but we have it in the model because the poor also get it. The temporary assistance for needed families, the TANF, this is like, this is the schedule. This is like a minimum income. So if my earnings are 0, I get an income guaranteed. I get a minimum income. And then it has a phase out. Okay, this is like an earned income tax credit without the phasing. So obviously it has negative income effects, negative income and substitution effects. So all the negative effects of the previous discussion applies here. Okay, so this program for sure will reduce labor supply if I'm already working. Well, the income effect is negative because imagine that my earnings per month is $500. So now I'm going to get $270 on top of this one. So I'm going to have more income. I'm going to have more income, so the income effect is negative. The substitution effect is 0 because it doesn't change my wage, but I have more income, so it's more income given to me. So if I'm richer, I tend to participate less. Right? I'm richer, so there is a negative income effect. This is the typical consumption model, the static model of consumption, right? So income is given to me, so I tend to work less because I don't need that much income anymore. Okay, it's a negative income effect. Okay, that's a good question. The earned income tax credit is federal. It's administered by the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service. This is one, I was a bit quickly, sorry for that. This is, there is a federal block grant. So the federal government gives $16.5 billion to the states. So the states can go there. This is like a common pocket of money. They go there, they get some. If they get some from this common pocket, they have to spend some of their own resources as well. That's the condition. So if Michigan gets $1 from this grant, Michigan has to use some cents of its own money to help the poor, to put into this program. But this program has been, to some extent, reduced over time. So the amount, 16.5, has been flat in nominal terms for more than, I don't remember, but more than 15 years for sure. So in real terms, the program is just going down. Look at the number of recipients. It's only 4 million against 27 million in the earned income tax credit. So the amount of money and the amount of recipients is smaller than in the previous one. That's why I'm saying that transfers that have earning requirements are becoming more important. And the last program that we are going to assess is the Supplemental Assistance Nutrition Program. It's called the food stamps. This is the largest spent per year between 70 and 80 billion US dollars. It has 46 million recipients. This is the largest one. It's an in-kind program. And the important thing for us here, because this is something that we are going to evaluate, is that this program has a requirement that you cannot have more than $2,000 in assets. So if your wealth is over $2,000, you do not qualify for this. And this condition is introduced in the form of a cliff. So if I have $1 less, I'm in. $1 more, I'm out. Okay, so the distortions on savings is going to be huge. So in the UK, they had a cliff of this type, and they just reformed it. They have a phase out. So now it's being phased out. If I have $1 more than the upper limit, my transfer gets smaller and smaller over time. But in the US, it's a cliff. So we are going to see how this is going to distort the saving decisions with the help of the model. Okay? So this is the SNAP, the food stamp program. As you can see, it's similar to the TANF. It has a minimum guaranteed, so it doesn't require that I have positive earnings. It has a little flat region, and then it has a phase out. So this is for, depending on the number of people in the assistance unit. This doesn't go for, this is not administered by the IRS. You don't need to fight to get this. So this depends on the number of people in the household. So depending on the number of people, you get a different amount of transfers. So these are the policies that we want to understand. We want to see how they affect labor supply, consumption, and marital decisions. So the model we have, the model that you are about to see, is a structural model where the main focus is on these three margins: labor supply, consumption, and marital decisions. So we need to introduce a little bit of a structure. I'm going to try to explain it in detail, but if you have questions, please interrupt me any moment. Okay? So this is our model. Let's start with demographics. The population in this economy are going to be ex-ante identical females and ex-ante identical males. They are going to enter in the economy at age 16 or 17. They are going to enter the economy as singles without children. As you can imagine, children are a very important ingredient in the model because the amount of transfer depends on the number of children. So we need to handle children. They enter the economy without children. Females, stochastically, they are going to receive fertility shocks. That is, 1 year they have a child. And this is going to be a stochastic process. That is, what we are doing with this is that we are not including behavioral responses in fertility from the programs. And we do that because empirical work suggests that people do not respond in terms of fertility decisions to taxes and transfers. So empirical literature suggests that there is no behavioral response. Our model has no behavioral response. Okay? People are going to choose. No, they don't choose fertility. Fertility is just exogenous to the policies. They can have up to 3 children. Children, they become adults and they leave the household also stochastically. But on average, they are going to stay in the household for 18 years. After 18 years, they do not qualify as a dependent. So you are not entitled to the programs. And when the children, they leave the household they leave our population of interest, and they move to be childless, and we don't look at them anymore. Okay? Because we care about families with children. Because in the US, anti-poverty policy is addressed mostly to families with children. Okay? This is going to be the population of the model. So let's start with fertility and the aging of the children. This is the stochastic process that controls fertility and controls the probability that the children, they leave the household. So you are going to see here 5 states. The first one is no children in the household. Individuals, they enter here. Females enter having no children. The 0 stands for no children. And next period, they can have 1 child. So they will move here to the second state. Obviously, if they have 1 child, the probability that they are without children is 0. So with some probability, they can have another child next year, and they move in this Markov chain. Okay? They might jump to remain childless forever. So some people, they never have children. So we also include that state to take into account that some people, they never have children in their lifetime. So this is the stochastic process. It's very simple. We are going to choose values for these parameters here so that we replicate the fraction of individuals by number of children. Okay? And the fraction of people that they remain childless for their lifetime. Now, let's go to earnings and productivity. So our model is going to have heterogeneous agents. We are going to have a continuous type of individuals. So it's not only 3 or 4 types. We are going to have a continuum of types. They are going to be different because they are going to be subject to different productivity shocks. Therefore, they will experience different lack in life. They will make different labor decisions. They will make different saving decisions. And they will end up placed in different parts of the income distribution. So we are going to have a continuum of individuals. Okay? And this continuum is generated by the variable Z that you see there, which defines earnings. Earnings is going to be E, is going to be the product of 3 numbers. Hours work, this is something that is chosen by the individual, how many hours per year they work. The productivity, which is set, some people are more productive than others, and the wage. So this is the wage rate that they get. Okay, so imagine that the wage rate is $15 per hour. Some people are less productive and they get only $8 per hour. Okay, so earnings is the product of these 3 things. Only one is chosen, which is hours work. Set is an exogenous process. The productivity is, you can think, health. Some people, they have a health issue. They are out of the labor market for half of the year, or they are just less productive that half of the year, and therefore earnings go down. So productivity follows a stochastic process. It's a simple one. And in households where there are 2 workers, because in a minute I'm going to introduce how individuals, they form families, we allow for some correlation between the shocks within the household. So this is meant to introduce that if 2 individuals are in the same occupation, if that occupation enters into a recession, they are going to lose more earnings. Okay, there is some correlation among earnings, among the labor productivity of 2 workers in the same household. You had a question there? No, W is the wage rate. No, productivity, think of productivity as having a mean equal to 1, which means that if yours, look at the process for productivity. This is in logs, okay? So the mean of this is 0, so that means that the mean of Z is 1. That means that if you are in the mean, you get the average wage for you, okay? If your Z is 1.1, it means that that year you are a bit more productive than the average. No, think of productivity as an exogenous process that it places you in the distribution. Okay, so this year you are very strong, you have no health issues, you are just in good shape, and you are at 1.1. So you get 10% more than the wage, that the market wage for your type. Okay, another year you are a bit sick, or you are a bit in the wrong sector of the economy because you were placing a sector that is going down, so you get a bit more than the market wage. We don't have production function. That's the thing. We don't have production function. We are going to have set times the wage, the demand side of the economy. Okay? So we don't have a production function because we are going to look only at the subset of the population. So we don't need a general equilibrium model. Okay, so this is the living arrangement in the model, which is endogenous. Also, we want to see how the taxes and transfers, they change the decision of individuals to form families. So they enter the economy as singles. Some mothers, they will have a fertility shock and they become single mothers. They may get some marriage proposals to accept or reject. But that's why the decision is endogenous. And they will get proposals either to cohabit, become a cohabiting couple, or to marry, in which case, if they accept, they become a married couple. Why we distinguish between cohabitation and marriage? Because the transfer programs depend on your marital status. For some programs, if you are cohabiting, it's as if you are single. So marital status is an important requirement, or not requirement, it defines eligibility and benefits for most of these programs. So we need to take into account cohabitation because in the US and Europe, the fraction of people that they cohabit is going up. That is, cohabitation is becoming a big competitor of marriage. And we are going to distinguish between two forms of cohabitation. One where the male in the household is not the father of the children, and the other where the male of the household is the father of the children. This is also important for defining eligibility and the benefits in some of these programs. So if a single mother cohabits with a male who happens not to be the father of the children, she is entitled to some transfer that she will she won't be if the male is the father of the children. So this is another important distinction because we are going to see that this introduces interesting distortions in the decision. Okay? So this is the structure of living arrangements, which is endogenous. They are going to move from one to the other in order to maximize their own utility. Okay? Now, keep in mind that the males, single males, are not going to be modeled. They make offers. And the females receive the offers, they make the decision. They say yes or no. If they say yes, they form the family, they join the assets they have, and they make joint decisions. If they say no, they keep on going as single. Okay? This is the way we do it. So single mothers enter the economy as singles without children. Sorry, females enter the economy as singles without children. They receive the fertility shocks. They receive proposals from males to form cohabiting or marriage decisions. They say yes or no. They choose labor supply, consumption, and savings. And they have fixed cost of labor force participation. So we need to have some people out of the labor force. So the fixed cost of working is going to be the sum of two components. This is the work-related cost, just to buy transportation to go to work, to buy new clothes, and this is child care. So a single mother, if she goes to work, she has to pay child care. Okay? This is an indicator function, which means that I only pay this cost if I work positive hours. This is an indicator function, I only pay the cost if I supply positive hours. So these are the two fixed costs of working. And we need them because we need to have some people that they decide not to participate. Now, these are couples, either cohabiting or married. This is common for the two couples. Couples, they are going to make decisions jointly. That is, they solve a joint maximization problem. We assume that they do risk sharing. And the risk sharing is going to be efficient in the sense that the allocations in the household are going to be in the Pareto frontier. And the fixed costs are going to be slightly different. The work-related costs are the same as of a single mother, because they have to buy transportation, they have to buy clothing. This is the same. But the child care, couples are going to have an advantage over single mothers because they can choose hours in such a way that one of them can always take care of the children. So the condition is that each individual has an endowment of 1 per period in terms of hours of work, in terms of hours. Okay? The time endowment is normalized to 1. If the sum of the 2 times, the female and the male, is less than 1, they don't need to pay childcare. Because one can work in the morning, the other works in the evening, so that there is always an adult at home. Okay, so they have an advantage in terms of childcare. So they have an advantage in terms of the fixed cost of labor force participation. Now, go to the model. Single mothers. This is the problem solved by single mothers. You are going to see a bunch of value functions there. This is a Bellman equation for single mothers. You are going to see a lot of value functions because they have to make many decisions. They have to make decisions on labor supply, on consumption, on savings, and whether or not to accept a cohabiting proposal in case they get one, whether or not to accept a marriage proposal in case they have one. So all the max that you see to the right of the equal sign, that you see on the right-hand side of the equation, all the max is that the single mother comparing the value of remaining to the value of accepting the proposal. Okay, so they have to compare what is my value if I remain single against what is my value if I accept the proposals to cohabit or to marry in case I have one. The pies are the probabilities that they receive a proposal. Okay, and this is the buy constraint. They have to buy their own consumption. They have to pay a consumption commitment. That is, running a household has a consumption commitment that they cannot change. I mean, you have to pay heating in the winter, you have to pay the rent, and this is something that is costly to change. So we model that as a consumption commitment. These are the fixed costs of labor force participation. This is my assets for the next period. And this is all my income sources. That is, I have earnings, I have capital income, I get child support. If I'm a single mother, I get child support from the father. I pay taxes. This is the IRS. So I pay taxes and receive the transfers. This is all my business with the IRS. Okay, this is the earned income tax credit and the taxes on labor income and capital income. This is TANF, and this is food stamps. Okay? So this is the maximization problem of the single mother. Therefore, if we change here the parameters in the taxes or the tax credits, if we change the TANF, if we change the food stamps, it's going to change the decisions of the single mother. This is the model includes behavioral responses of single mothers to taxes and transfers. Now, what happens if one of these mothers accepts a cohabitation offer? So she forms a cohabiting couple. Let's start with a cohabiting couple where the male is not the father of the children. Okay? What happens here? The first thing to notice is that they solve a joint maximization problem. Eta, this parameter here, is the bargaining power of each individual household. That is, if it is 0.5, means that the two individuals, they have 50% of the power. If the power of the female is 0.6, it means that she has more power than the male. Okay? This is a way of splitting the joint decision between the two, assigning bargaining powers to the two individuals. Now, what they do, they maximize the utility in the current period plus the expected continuation value. And they have to make a decision, they are cohabiting, whether to get married or not. So, if they are cohabiting, they always have the option of getting married if that's in the benefit of the couple. Okay? And you can do that simply based on tax and transfer policies. The value constraint, this is the interesting one, because the father is not the male is not the father of the children. For TANF, the male doesn't count. So for the temporary assistance for needed families, remember the program that it had a flat region and then a phase out. We only look at the earnings of the female. We only look at the assets of the female. We don't care about the male in the household. This is very convenient for the single mother because she can marry a very wealthy man and she still receives the transfer. So this is the key thing. This is why we introduced this type of household. For food stamps, they look at assets and earnings of the couple. But for TANF, this is going to be the main source of distortion. Many women, they decide not to marry and to cohabit with a male who is not the father of the children because they remain entitled to TANF, to the temporary assistance for needed families. However, if the cohabiting couple, both parents are present, that is the male is the father of the children, you can see that in the TANF, all the assets and all the earnings are included to choose to decide on eligibility, okay, and also on benefit. If the two of them are the parents of the children, they have to make all the decisions are the previous couple, and they have to make an extra decision that who of the two is going to file as head of household. Because one is going to file as head of household, but the other has to file as single without dependents. So this is a non-trivial decision, because depending on the distribution of earnings and depending on the decision they make on hours work, they also have to choose, on top of that, who is going to file as head of household. They are not married. So the only option for them is that one of them has to file as head of household and the other has to file as single. I don't know what the rules are in different countries of the EU, but this is how it works in the US. So only one of the two can claim the children as dependents. The two of them cannot claim children as dependents separately, okay? Because the same children cannot be dependent for two different taxpayers, okay? So the problem here is a bit more complicated because we have also to choose optimally who is the head of household, and we are going to see that individuals are going to choose this strategically in order to maximize their values. And finally, married couples. Married couples, they solve a relatively simple problem. They are going to do joint filing. So everything depends on total household earnings and on total assets in the household. Okay, so this is the model. They don't divorce. We could also introduce another margin, how families break up, how marriages break up because of the taxes and transfers. But again, there is some empirical evidence that divorcing has a fixed cost. So it's costly to divorce. So most of the time doesn't compensate for the transfer. That is, people, they don't divorce just to get more income from the transfers. Okay? So entering into marriage is cheap. Exiting is costly. So there is a fixed cost of breaking down. You have to pay a lawyer. Probably you have to sell the house. And you don't do that just to get $3,000 more from transfers. Okay? Now, this is the model.
Salvador?
Yes.
And the couples that are just cohabiting, they don't split?
They don't split. They move to marriage or they remain cohabiting, okay, but they don't split.
They cannot go back to be single?
No, they don't. Not in the model, which is also something that could be relaxed, because we know that cohabitation is quite unstable family formation, type of family. Most of them split. We could introduce that as well.
Because there was not this cost of divorce.
We don't have it.
Okay.
We don't have it.
Thanks.
Yeah. So this is the model. And now what we are going to do is to calibrate the model, to assign values to all these parameters. For that, we are going to use a sample of households drawn from the 2014 CPS. This is going to be we have several thousand individuals in the three categories: single mothers, cohabiting couples of the two types, and married couples. We use information from them. This is the input we have to calibrate the model, and we do the standard calibration exercise. Now, this is our sample of households. You can see some statistics for these individuals. The first one is the fraction of individuals in each family type. the distribution by number of children, the distribution by number of workers in the household. You can see some statistics here. It's quite interesting. For instance, we have that for single mothers, 20% of them, they don't participate in the labor market. For married couples, you have the distribution of over the number of workers. So you have 60% of them where the two, almost 60%, the two work, actually 56%, the two work, 41%, only one worker in the household. You can see some statistics here that I don't want to spend much time. Now, we do some exercise of model fit. This is just to compare how the model does. So you have the data, you have the model, what the model generates after the calibration. As you can see, the numbers are fairly close. I don't want to go much in detail here, but all the numbers are fairly close. You can see the distribution by number of earnings is quite good. Average hours work per year by females and males is quite good as well. Even the distribution by earnings, except for the standard deviation that the model generates less volatility than in the data. But this is not, to some extent, it's good news, because we think that there is a lot of misreporting in the data. People that they report that they earn per year $300. So obviously the model doesn't generate that because there is a fixed cost of entering. So $300 probably is misreporting, or someone who just got $300, but you cannot call that labor force participation. We had a question pending. Yes. Oh, no. Yeah, no, that's a good point. So males, keep in mind that our population of individuals are non-college educated individuals. So there is no much dispersion in this group in terms of education or skills in the labor market. So it's a quite homogeneous population. So males, they make offers just to the first woman they encounter, if you want to think about it. And they look at the asset levels of the individual, they look at what is the productivity level of this individual, and they decide yes or no. But the male is not maximizing when they make the offers. That's a good point. No. They just... That's correct. So the males are like automatas. They just get out and they make an offer, and they don't even decide. You can think that in the background there is some process that determines on the type of offer, but in this version of the model, the male is not maximizing over that. Which we think that is not a drawback of the model, because the population is quite homogeneous. They are non-college educated individuals. So it's a quite... so we don't have high educated individuals and low educated individuals. If we had this dispersion, then the assumption would be probably incorrect. So here, I'm not saying that it's correct, but it's probably less damaging to the model. Okay? So the model does quite well. I don't want to go more into the detail. We have more comparisons here to make. Just a few minutes. The model does also very well at matching elasticities estimated in the data. There is a huge empirical literature estimating the behavioral responses, estimating the elasticities, how individuals change hours work or participation depending on the taxes and transfers. They have been estimated in the data, and our model matches quite well those elasticities. So elasticities is an important issue in structural models, because we need to have a model that generates elasticities similar to the ones estimated in the data. Okay? So we spend quite a bit of time making sure that the elasticities in the model are the right ones. Now, I'm going to skip all this. This is just elasticities. Let me go now to the effects of the US tax transfer system across the equilibrium distribution. Now, let's take a closer look at how different individuals, and by different individuals I mean by marital status, and I mean the level of earnings. That is, even though we have non-college educated individuals, some people are going to earn $10,000 per year, and some people are going to earn $70,000 per year. So let's see how the tax transfer system in the US is going to introduce distortions among all these individuals, among individuals in different places of the distribution. Okay? So let's start with single females' participation tax rates. So the participation tax rate, basically the tax rate that I pay if I participate minus the tax rate that I pay if I don't participate divided by earnings. It's a measure of how my taxes and transfers change if I participate versus if I don't participate. Okay? And they give me, we are going to look at this graph because they give me a measure of the incentives embedded in the tax transfer system to participate in the labor market. Okay? For instance, this is the one generated by the model. This is for single mothers depending on the number of children. What we have here is labor productivity. So you can think of people here with different productivities. So 1 here means that it has the average productivity equal to 1. So if my productivity is low, if I'm around 1 or less than 1, my participation tax rate, it can get as negative as 20%. If I'm a single mother of 3, my participation tax rate is close to minus 20%, which means that the incentives to participate are huge. I get a bonus of 20% to participate. So with this graph, we see that low productive individuals in the US, they have huge incentives to participate thanks in the labor market, thanks to the tax transfer system. If my productivity is high, I'm a more productive individual, then the participation tax rate, it goes to 30%. If I'm very productive, it goes to 30%, which means that I'm participating by paying with respect to not participating. Okay? Which is the obvious one. I mean, the tax transfer system has to get money from the, it's a progressive one, so that's what we should expect. But the important thing are the numbers here. That is, how the tax transfer system incentivizes active individuals to participate in the labor market. Second, how much does it cost to have all these incentives to the government? That is, what is the cost for the government of having these huge incentives for people to participate? And what we do is we do the net extra cost of having single mothers participating. This means that this is the additional cost that we will pay to a single mother if she did not participate, how much extra we pay by having them participating. Okay? This is not the total cost. It's the extra, is the net extra cost. That this is the cost on top of having them non-participating. That is, we to make them participate. Okay? So, this is the first line. This is the net cost of participation in dollars, is measured in dollars, per participating single mother, per person, per single mother participating. So the thing is that for single mothers of 2 and 3, they cost us money. So for single mothers of 2, we pay $1,600 extra for having them in the labor market. For single mothers of 3, we pay $2,700 for having them participating in the labor market. We can do the same for the net cost of participation per hour work. That is, this is not per mother, this is per hour work. And this is also in dollars. So we pay $2 per hour work of a mother of 3. So every hour a mother of 3 is working is costing us, it's costing the treasury, is costing $2. Okay? So now, why these numbers are important? Because if we think that a single mother working has some value beyond the money that she gets, because she can get attachment to the labor market, then these $2 might be worth spending. if there is no such a value, probably we should not have them participating, because they cost us $2 per hour that they work. Now, let's go to the distortions in savings. The distortions in savings, this is also for single mothers. What we are plotting here are the policy functions for savings. Remember that savings, we had A denoting savings, so this is the level of assets they have today. This is the level of assets they choose for next year. Okay, so you can think of you can think of this as the assets I have today, and for different single mothers, depending on the number of children, the assets they choose to have next period. So if they are above the 45-degree line, is that they are net savers. If they are below, is that they are net dissavers. So the thing is that, let's look, for instance, at the black one, which is a single mother of 1 with a labor productivity of 1.8. This is a high productive single mother. Imagine that, remember that the threshold to get the benefits was $2,000. To get the food stamps, it was $2,000. So this mother, if she has $5,000 today, she's going to choose $5,000 for tomorrow. She's going to save $3,000 today so that she remains entitled to the program next year. It's a huge distortion. This is because of the cliff. Think of this single mother, the red one. She has the average labor productivity equal to 1. If she has today $14,000, she's going to save $12,000 to remain in the program. So this is a graph that is meant to capture the disincentives introduced by the cliff in assets for entitlement in the food stamp program in the model. So the idea is that you can see huge savings. People save a huge amount of money so that they remain entitled to the program. This is something that we don't want to see. We don't want people to save simply because they want to remain entitled to a transfer program. We want people to retain the incentive to increase savings. So this graph calls for introducing a phase out in the programs with respect to wealth. Okay, this is an important call for that. Now let's go to the participation tax rate. This is the definition of the participation tax rate. We are going to do that for cohabiting and married females earning $20,000 as a function of the earnings of the male and as a function of the number of children. So this is something generated from the model. And the idea is just to illustrate the huge disincentives introduced by the programs into the labor supply decision of married mothers. Okay? So what you have here are the participation tax rates. What you have here is the labor force participation of married mothers and cohabiting mothers. So you have them for different colors. They stand for cohabiting females or married females. Let's look at the married females. So the black color. For instance, a married female with 3 children as a function of male earnings, the husband's, how much the husband earns. When the husband earns around $20,000, they are in the phase out of the earning on tax credit. They are in the declining part, in the phasing out of the program. So if she participates, if she goes and works, she will pay a huge participation tax rate, close to 75%. That's exactly because an extra dollar earned by the mother, by the female, puts the family out of the program. So the participation tax rate there just skyrockets. And what happens to the labor force participation? Obviously, when the participation tax rate gets high, labor force participation gets low. That is, married mothers go to participate because they will have to pay a huge participation tax rate. So, as you can see, the participation tax rate of married mothers goes down deeply in the region where these earnings places the family towards the phasing out of the programs. And then when they are out of the program, obviously the participation tax rate goes up because they have nothing to lose anymore. So the idea is the high participation tax rates introduced by the phasing out of the programs. So the main message from this graph, that transfer programs, they might introduce huge distortions to labor force participation to married mothers. Huge, because the programs are based on household earnings, not on individual earnings. They are based on the earnings of the unit, of the household, which means that the household is going to choose strategically, and when they are approaching the phase out, the secondary earner just withdraws from the labor market. Okay? So keep in mind that a transfer program based on household earnings might have huge distortions on secondary earners. This is the main message of the graph. Okay? So I have half an hour. I briefly want to discuss effective tax rates before and after tax credits, just to see how tax credits affect the effective tax rates of the units. So what we have here, this is from the model, this is from the data. So what I want to see here is how the tax credits affect different type of households, cohabiting households versus married households. So what we have is, let's look for instance at the black graph. So this is from the data. We get this from the data, and this shows us how the tax credits that help married households in the data to reduce the effective tax rates. Okay? So this is not the tax rate. This is the reduction in the tax rate. Okay? This is the difference between effective tax rates before and after tax credits. So if household income is very low, the tax credits, they help them reduce the effective tax rates. And this is a very significant drop. Obviously, as income goes up, tax credits, they have a lower impact because some of them, they don't get entitled to tax credits anymore. So tax credits, they don't play any role. Okay? So this is what you see for married couples. This is what you see for cohabiting couples. And this is the one generated from the model. As you can see, it has a similar shape. Obviously, there is some difference because the model is just an approximation. But for married couples, it's quite close. For the other, the ranking is the same, even though the position is a bit different. But quantitatively, it's very similar. So the model does a good job at capturing how tax credits contribute to reducing effective tax rates. So the important thing here, what we want to notice is the following. Cohabiting couples are much better at using tax credits to reduce effective tax rates at higher levels of income. So think of a household that they make $70,000. If they are married, they are no longer entitled to any tax credit. So tax credit, they don't reduce the effective tax rates. However, if I'm a cohabiting couple, I can always play with the filing status and I will still manage to reduce my effective tax rate. So if I'm cohabiting, total earnings is $70,000. But imagine that the male makes 50 and the female makes 20. So it's very clear what they have to do. She is going to file as head of household. She's going to claim the children as dependent, and they are still entitled to the tax credits. So the tax credit still does the job of reducing the effective tax rate almost 10%. Okay? Percentage points. Okay, that's the idea of the graph. So if we go to the model, we see that the same thing is going on. So that is, the model captures very well that cohabiting couples are making strategic use of the filing status in order to benefit from tax credits. Okay, so huge disincentives here to family formation, because if I'm cohabiting, I can extract more from tax credits. So we should expect that marriage formation is going to be distorted by the tax transfer system. And this is what we look at in the next graph. So these are the acceptance rates of cohabiting and marriage proposals by single females. So this is in terms of labor productivity. Okay? If productivity is low, a very low productive mother, a very low productive single mother is going to accept most of the offers, as high as almost 80% of the offers. Okay? She's very productivity is very low, so the proposal is good for her because this is a good thing for her. And there is no much difference between marriage and cohabiting proposals. As the labor productivity of the single mother increases, you start seeing a gap between the acceptance rates. So marriage proposals, they go down sharply. So they start to rejecting more and more marriage proposals. However, cohabiting proposals are still quite high. Let's look at the blue. This is the acceptance rates of a cohabiting offer from a male who is not the father of the children. This is a good deal. She is quite productive. The male comes. Probably he will bring some earnings. He will bring some assets. And he doesn't cause that a lot of damage in terms of entitlement to transfer programs. So the acceptance rates, they go down, obviously, but not as much as marriage offers. So this graph basically is meant to show the distortions in marriage for by the tax transfer system in the US. So this is the idea of the graph.
Just to add, it's like the cohabitation situations like smooth. Every effect is smooth.
In the graph, you mean?
Yes.
On acceptance rates?
Yes, and in the other graphs, the line was much more horizontal.
Well, this is the average. This is the average among single mothers with this labor productivity. So this is like a mean among all women with this labor productivity. That's why you see probably the smoothness.
Okay.
So you mean smoothness, that is, the slope is less pronounced than in other graphs?
Yes, the effects are not so high.
Yeah, as compared to
the other.
this one here.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good thing to notice, yes. Assortative what? Here all individuals are non-college educated. The maximum degree is a high school. So there is less room for assortative.
You sort of have two independent probabilities of the earnings of the two earners. So you have this tail, probably this blue tail in the cohabitation can be also driven by that. Whereas if there could be some sort of a covariance, it could be forced some co-movement in productivity in the couple, maybe you will get, you will tend towards the zero also in the blue line. Is it, so how much is this independence, say, of the probabilities of the Z's in the two individuals of the households?
To the probability of?
Of the Z, so the productivity probability in the two members of the cohabiting households driving, let's say, the last blip, the last jump in the blue lines in the
acceptance rates?
No, in the previous slide, yes.
Here?
In the tax credit.
They follow the same process. They have the same process for labor productivity.
If in the data you observe some correlation between the earnings of the two, and this correlation, let's say, smooth out the tax credit for high earning couples, so for the right tail of the distribution.
The correlation is quite low. So what you're saying is that I don't get exactly your point.
In a 80,000.
Well, but that's true. But that's true in the three lines. That's true even if you are married or if you are cohabiting. So the process is the same.
But if you're married, then you cannot play with the with the
exactly.
Largest,
but the underlying stochastic process for labor productivity is the same across these three lines.
Okay,
there is no distinction.
But in a married couple, then you can take advantage of the fact that you're drawing twice, and then one of the two times you can earn also your credits. Whereas in the cohabiting couples, you can take advantage of this.
Yeah,
of this
that's the idea.
independent
That's what the graph shows. So I don't know what is
process.
exactly the
If
point.
these two draws were not completely independent, so that if there was some degree of co-movement or correlation.
There is one. There is one here. Yes.
Between the two members of the couple,
Yes.
you will reduce the scope for the cohabiting couples to.
No. Because we have some correlation here in the model.
Okay.
That's what I said at the beginning. We have this correlation between the labor productivity of males and females within the same couple. Oh, yes. Yes. So let me move quickly, 20 minutes I have, just to discuss the evaluation of 3 plans. So the idea is that we have a model. The model does well in terms of model fit. We now understood the effects on different people in the distribution. Now we are going to use the model as a lab, as a laboratory for ex-ante policy evaluation. That is, we are going to change some things in the tax transfer system, and we are going to see how this translates into different outcomes. Okay, that's the idea. So this is something that you do here. So this is something that I don't need to explain. So we are going to look at mostly 2 reforms. The first one, as I introduced before, is this 21st Century Worker Tax Cut Act, which was introduced by a Democrat. She was at the time a chairwoman at the US Senate Committee. And the idea of the reform is to address what I showed you before. That is, remember the merit females that the labor force participation drops because of the tax credits. So she realized that, this senator, and she introduced a reform to the earned income tax credit aimed at solving this distortion. So the idea, I think that is a straightforward one, is just to introduce a new deduction for married couples with children of 20% of the earnings of the secondary earner, of the secondary worker. What this means? This means that for the sake of computing eligibility and benefits to the earned income tax credit, household earnings will be computed as is shown here. That is, earnings will be the sum of the earnings of the female and the male minus 20% of the earnings of the secondary worker. This is just for the sake of the eligibility and benefits of the earned income tax credit. Okay? So this 20% is as if it was not earned, in order to choose eligibility and benefits for the EITC. Okay? So this is obvious, it's straightforward, right? So you can go and work. I'm not looking at 20% of your income. You don't need to have this value in labor force participation. Okay? Let's look at the long-run effects. And we are going to look at the long-run effects of this deduction to married couples. First on population. So obviously the fraction of single mothers, cohabiting couples, and married couples is endogenous. So in the long run it will change the number of people in each marital status. So the fraction of single mothers goes down. So this is the value in the benchmark model, the benchmark calibration. This is the difference between the new value and the old one. Okay? So basically it goes down 0.11%. So there will be less single mothers. That's obvious, right? Because basically it's something that benefits marriage, is going to benefit married couples, so marriage is becoming more attractive. So there will be less single mothers in the economy. Obviously there will be more married couples, and there will be less cohabiting couples. Because if I'm cohabiting, now to me it's a good because I get a deduction. Now, the new marriage rate obviously goes up. The percentage of all births outside of marriage goes down. I mean, less children will be born outside of the wedlock. And the fraction of children living in poverty also goes down. Because poverty is mostly among single mothers than married. There are more, also less child poverty because of a new deduction. So it looks good. But now we need to identify whether there are winners and losers of this proposal. In the aggregate, it seems that things work well. But we have to use the model, and that's why we need a model, to see whether there are losers after this reform. Can you guess who are going to be the losers? Because someone is going to lose. The single mothers are going to be the losers. If you go to single mothers, there will be less of them. But those that remain single mothers, they are going to lose. It's a reform that doesn't apply to them, only applies to married mothers, but the single mothers are going to be worse off. If you look at the welfare gain or loss, this is the average welfare among single mothers, it goes down slightly. It's true that it's not a big number, but it's a negative number. So this is just a signal. This is just something to pay attention to. The model says that single mothers are going to lose if we introduce a deduction to married couples. And why is the reason? The reason is quite simple. The reason is that we have to look at average household wealth. They are going to save much less. Savings are going to be lower, so there are going to be less precautionary savings. They are subject to this idiosyncratic risk all the time. They cannot borrow. This is a model without borrowing. So less wealth, it means they are less insured to shocks. They are going to suffer more from labor productivity shocks. Now the question is, why they save less? They save less because they are going to marry faster than before. So they don't want to save much when they form a married couple. The assets are going to be pooled. They don't want that. So they know that marriage is going to happen faster than before. They want to get to that point with less assets because they don't want to pool assets. They prefer that the assets come from the other party. So the idea is that they are going to be less time in the state of single mothers, but the time they are there, they are going to have lower welfare. So this is something that to keep in mind to think before applying the reform. That when we touch something for a group, the other groups might be affected as well. They are not disconnected. Now, for married couples, this is a good deal. Both females and males, they are better off. Especially males. Especially males. Females are also better off, but especially males, they benefit most. Obviously, because the female goes to work more, she suffers a utility loss because the disutility from leisure is going to be there. So look at the labor force participation of females, it goes up 3.2%. So more women go to work. They still benefit, but they have to work. Right? So there is a utility loss of working that. And the males, they were already working, so there is more income in the household, so they are the main ones that get benefit from this reform. Okay? Let's go to reform number 2, quickly. This is a more comprehensive reform. The previous one was a very simple one. It's just a 20% deduction to the earners of a secondary worker in a married couples. This is just a more comprehensive one. This is introduced by should be an R here, it's a Republican, it's not a Democrat. And this reforms both the tax scheme, the ITC, and the child tax credit. It's more comprehensive. Here we can see what it does. It reduces the number of tax rates to 3. So 10% in the first bracket, 25% in the second bracket, and 35% in the third bracket. Eliminates the head of filing status. The lowest income bracket is extended from $17,000 to $71,000. This is going to be the main thing. So nowadays, the first bracket stops at $17,000. Under this reform, it will be extended to $71,000. It's a huge extension with only 10% tax rate to people earning with income to $71,000. It will increase the child tax credit from $1,000 to $1,500. and it's going to be across the ITC subsidy rates. So the ITC are going to be much lower. Okay, less help to poor families. And these are the results. In terms of demographics, more married couples, less cohabiting couples, less single mothers, less children in poverty, less births outside of marriage. And here, all of them are winners. There are no losers from this reform. Single mothers, they benefit. They work more. They work less. Labor force participation goes down, but they marry more than before. Hours work go up. So participation goes down, but those participating, they work longer hours. They make more earnings. Disposable income goes down a little bit. Wealth just goes a lot, 10% up. And obviously, poverty goes down. They receive less from the transfers. And married couples, they are also better off. As you can see, the welfare of the two goes up. Labor force participation just go up, especially for females. And hours work, they also go up. So the idea is that this program has a little bit of cost for the government because it's going to collect less on taxes, but also on transfers. This is like $600 is in the paper. I don't have the figure here. It has a little bit of a cost, a few $100s per person in this economy, but it's not that much. So it's not a huge cost, and it's very. So basically, it relies on low taxes to promote participation and hours work among the workers. This is something that only with the model we could see, because it's a more comprehensive reform, involves more changes, and these are the results of the model. Okay. There is a third reform, which is an EITC based on personal earnings. Remember that if we base the ITC on household earnings, there are this problem with the secondary workers because they interact in the decision. We have this valley in the participation tax rate of the single mothers. Some proposals, this is a plan put forward by MAG in 2015, just last year. This is a person working at the Urban Institute's Tax Policy Center in the US. And the proposal is to replace the current EITC with a worker credit based on personal earnings so that there are no distortions among married couples and cohabiting couples. It's just on a personal basis. And we implement this reform by offering workers with children the current EITC schedule for single mothers with one child. This is quite arbitrary. So we offer every individual the same schedule nowadays is offered to single mothers with one child. We had to choose one, and we chose this one. So this third reform is less informative because the proposal is just a little bit arbitrary. So this is the results. The demographics is that single motherhood goes up, marriage goes up, cohabitation goes down, and single mothers, they lose, obviously, because we are offering all of them the schedule for single mothers with one. So single mothers with 2 and 3, they will lose. And married couples, females, they lose, and males, they benefit from this. But again, I don't want to emphasize this reform because it's a bit arbitrary. So the other two, they were more informative than this one, because it just set a level of individual, personally ITC, which is just some arbitrary numbers. They don't mean much. Okay? So I'm going to stop here. The bottom line, or the conclusion, is that we have a model that includes behavioral responses to tax and transfer reform. It can be used as a lab to do ex-ante policy evaluation. It includes important margins as labor supply, consumption and savings, and family formation. And we are extending the model to include more general equilibrium feature, like a demand side for labor, so that we can have more general equilibrium effects, and especially to study the incidence of these problems. You know that helping the poor, this model assumes that 100% of the help stays with the poor. It can be that it reduces the wages of the poor. So the ITC especially is a subsidy to low wages. It can be that employers, they take some advantage and they reduce the wage. So this is one of the topics that is, we don't know much about it. We don't know how much is the incidence of the help, who is going to be the final recipient of these transfers, whether the employers or the workers. And I think that this is one of the main topics of research for the next years. So to study anti-poverty policy incidence of these transfers. This is a first order question. So we are extending the model to include the demand side of labor, to include employers, so trying to capture how much the wage goes down as we increase the subsidy to low wages. Okay? You have any question? We have like 3 minutes.
One suggestion. I started this random process for childbirth, in a way there is an exogenous probability of children. But maybe the data can be observed whether after forming a couple, after marriage or cohabiting, the probability of having children increases. Because in this case, for the results not only for family information but also for demographics. So it could be if after forming a couple, so if it was not like perspective, would also say that the demographic change of their form could be faster. Because I was thinking probably for the data you cannot have a probability say, of having a second child.
Well, that's an empirical question. I mean, that's a good question, but I think the answer, I don't know the answer to that question, but I think we will have to look at the data and how many marriages are formed after the child is born. And I guess that the fraction of marriages when there is a child present is sizable. Or without children. So you are already conditioning on a marriage formed without children. Yeah, that will have some effect because when someone accepts a marriage proposal, it knows that the probability that has a child next year is higher. And that means that has some implications, yes. Yeah, that's something that could be done. For us, that's a non-interesting population because they don't get the help, right? So they don't get the transfers. So if you know, a hairdresser marries a millionaire, for us the hairdresser is no longer of interest because she's not at the risk of poverty. So she will never receive a transfer. Probably they don't want to. I mean, you use the example of a very rich person, so probably they don't care for $2,000 or $3,000. Oh yeah, yes. I don't know. Probably that's not straightforward. No, I see your point. I see your point that for some people, yeah. Yeah. No, I see your point. Your point is, you use an example that probably was the incorrect one because it gives me, the opportunity. The answer is very easy. But a high school graduate can marry a college-educated person. That happens, obviously, and they are not in our sample. And probably that couple will be a recipient of transfers. Now, we wanted to focus on this just to have, a first glance of a population that is an obvious candidate for that, and to have an homogeneous. A relatively homogeneous population, so we don't have this issue that came up before about assortative matching and things like that. The population is very homogeneous. So the model can be parsimonious and without, introducing a shortcoming in that sense. Yeah.
Just a remark, I think it was the research center posted some statistics on childhood within and outside of marriage. Quite interesting to get the...
Oh, definitely. I was not aware of that. So we can talk after the seminar about this. Thank you.
I wanted to take back to the point about the saving and the wealth. So you're saying that some relatively wealthy, reasonably wealthy people with $10,000 or more at the bank would reduce their wealth to below $2,000 because they keep the food stamps benefit. So presumably the food stamps benefit is quite significant.
Well, we have it here. Yeah, so, okay, that's a good point. Just 1 minute. First, let's go to, these are the food stamps. So this is for monthly earnings. This has nothing to do with assets here in the horizontal line. This is monthly earnings. This is how much you get. So if your earnings are, let's say, $500 per month, the food stamps you get amount to $800 per month for a family of 5. Okay, so think of. Okay, I know why you got a bit surprised by the graph with the savings. Think that the exercise is purely the individual comparing the value from doing the desaving against the value from not doing the desaving. So what the individual is doing is comparing the utility that gets today for increasing consumption, because desaving means that today my consumption goes up. That gives me utility today. Okay. What is the cost of doing that? It means that in the future I'm going to be more exposed to shocks. Okay, I have less precautionary savings. If something bad happens to me in terms of labor productivity, I'm less insured. But on the one hand, I remain in the program. So I get the $800 per month from food stamps. So the trade-off is that it's good for me to save $12,000 if I have $14,000, so that I remain entitled. So the insurance from the food stamps compensates the loss of insurance from my savings. So this is just a purely quantitative exercise. So it strikes you because you think that probably real people will not do that. Here, these are people that they do the computation right. Probably in the real life people are unable to do the computation as accurately as in the model. So this is just a purely calculation exercise. They compute the value from having less insurance in the future from their own assets versus having the insurance from the food stamps. Okay, so they are trading two sources of insurance. Yeah. That's why, we were also a bit surprised from the graph that is that important. It shows you how distorting is to have a cliff in the wealth level. It should be phased out so that people gradually they start responding to this instead of having these huge disincentives that it can make some people to save big amounts of assets. Well, we are talking about $10,000. We are talking about $10,000, $12,000, $14,000 in a bank account. So I don't think that if all your wealth is $14,000, you buy a painting. So we are not talking about hundreds of thousands.
But you can always move your savings to assets which are not identified as liquid. So the way you can arbitrage the liquidity of the assets and then you can
Oh, no. This is all your wealth. This has nothing to do with liquidity. So.
But in real life, in the US, which type of assets are considered projects? Because the houses
No, okay, so that's a good question. We read that, we read the manuals, and your car is not included because you need your car to go to work. Depending on the states, you can have some more wealth can be excluded. This typically applies to financial wealth, to the money you have in the bank, bonds, equity. No, but we are talking about $10,000, $15,000 that you want to have there as a precautionary motive. So you want them to be liquid. Okay, so you don't want to sell your car if next period things are not going that well because you lose a lot in the transaction cost. So we are talking about $10,000, $20,000. We are not talking about hundreds of thousands.
Any other question? No? Okay, so I thank you a lot for presenting. It was really a very nice presentation, very useful for us, very valuable. So I hope we keep in touch, and when you have new research, you can
Sure.
come again to present.
Thank you. Thank you for the comments, and we can talk about this this
so
report.
Salvador is having lunch with us down in the canteen. We can go all together at 1 as usual. Okay? Okay. Thanks
Thank
so
you very
much,
much.
Salvador.
Thank you.
Thank you.